I bet those glasses make you see better.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Wilson. I'm the host of The Crucible. I'm a YouTube entertainer. I am the perfect panelist here today. I have no books, but my wife, Rachel Wilson, who has been on Pearly Things multiple times. I do take all of her book royalties and then I spend them on guns. And I do this all the time, and I find it amusing. And it kind of makes her a little bit sad, and I find that amusing too. I noticed that Tim Gordon is here, and he has long hair. Now you know why Catholics wear such big hats. So we've got that figured out too. I did get a chance to meet Aaron Clary. I don't know if everybody knows that. I was surprised because he has a big personality. He comes in a kind of smaller package, but he has a big personality. So I was happy to meet him too, and I appreciate you guys having us on today so that we can have this out.
So my first question for you guys is, now we're seeing the childlessness rate go up, the average number of kids go down, and men and women are having a harder time forming relationships than ever. What do you believe is the cause of this problem? Andrew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, the cause of the issue is secularism.
Okay.
It's always been the root cause of almost all societal blights in the West has been the move towards secularism. Secularists came in right about the late 1800s. We saw another influx of them with the communist infiltration and the pushing of feminism in mass media. But secularism is the primary cause. If you look at the reproduction rates in the West, Western democracies can't reproduce. Non-patriarchal nations cannot reproduce. They're not doing it. We will have a population collapse. There's nothing that we can do about that at this point. And unless we start moving towards some type of methodical grounding for morality inside the West, we're basically doomed.
Wow. That's very grim. Okay, Aaron, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I wouldn't necessarily disagree with Andrew. I'd say the lack of religion or some kind of philosophy to keep people wedded to the idea of being married is certainly there. But I would also say there's some non-religious factors that are also going against the grain of marriage and having kids, namely the risk and the cost that disproportionately men face in terms of divorce, but then also the cost and raising the kids, which isn't necessarily an excuse, but also the cost of the welfare state, where beforehand you're only taking about 3% of people's income, and now you take about a third, depending on your income.
They take a third of your income?
Well, it depends. If you look at government spending to GDP, it's actually about 40%, but that's because the rich people subsidize middle income and poor. So roughly speaking, here in the United States, it's a third. In the United Kingdom, I'm sure it's higher. I'd have to look at the data. But when you're paying for basically another family's children because they're whether it's out of wedlock, broken homes, single moms, whatever, that cost is part of that, a large part of that calculation. So there's a huge financial cost. There's a huge financial risk. There's a huge legal risk. And, most guys are just like, well, geez, I can't, I could barely feed myself. So there's that. And then also I'd say from an economics perspective would be the Industrial Revolution and white collar work, where my running theory, and of course people might disagree, but I don't think girls really like guys all that much. And now that you had the Industrial Revolution, which has allowed us to have a lot of white collar work, it is no longer physical labor or toil that you can earn a living. You could be a programmer. You can do what we all do here. Without the Industrial Revolution, we wouldn't be podcasters. And so now that allows women that they can go ahead and do white collar work. They can support themselves. And now in that sense, they've been economically and financially liberated from men. And now you get to see them make their choice. And I think women's demand for marriage was lower than it was than when women were economically dependent upon men. It doesn't help also that they're propagandized starting in school. They're like, oh, you don't need no man. So there's certainly that cultural aspect. But I think certainly that the fact that people can support themselves and no longer economically interdependent, now you get to see their real interest in forming relationships. And I think women's interest in marriage and demand for marriage is lower than we all suspected.
Okay. Tim, what do you think?
Well, I like both of those answers a lot. and nice to meet you, Aaron. By the way, I said what's up to Paul. I would just say that the epistemic floor, the ground beneath both of those answers these two smart gents gave is egalitarianism. Egalitarianism is the problem of secularism. It's also the problem of the indoctrination in the schools. I think Paul, last time he was on, when you said something like the left loves feminism, the right loves chivalry. I would iterate this slightly. The left loves egalitarianism plus sex egalitarianism. They mean women should have the advantage. And the right loves egalitarianism proper. And I would say both of these are a problem. Obviously, the left's point of view, egalitarianism plus is just feminism. But egalitarianism proper, which by and large the right wing has embraced, I would say there are lots of elements in
what's
MGTOW.
What's egalitarianism proper? Can you explain that more?
Equality. Men and women are the exact same. This is the basic idea. Mm-hmm. Men and women are the exact same. Therefore, things like voting rights. Well, if men have it, women should have it.
Oh, right. Okay.
Working rights. If men work, women should work.
We're interchangeable widgets.
Yeah.
We're not widgets that are fungible. Right? Men and women are radically different with absolutely different needs that are complementary. They go together. And what they go together for is specifically procreation. I mean, literally, That's what the reproductive system is for. That's what this whole game is about. And you can't have this conversation without talking about egalitarianism. It's at the heart of the Jacobins, the French Revolution, all that shit. It's at the heart of everything wicked in modernism, is making two things that ain't equal. And, hopefully we can get way into egalitarianism today. Yeah. The left just says women are better than men now. They've taken the mask off. The right says, no. Women and men are the exact same. Right. It's all nonsense.
Well, yeah, because I'd never even heard the women shouldn't vote argument, like, ever from the right. Like, I literally never heard it until it wasn't until I started reading the anti-suffragettes writings where I was like, oh, wow, this is kind of eerie. They kind of predicted everything that would happen.
Absolutely.
But then they'll say I'm too far gone, the trad cons, I guess. I'm gone.
Well, voting's not going to do it. Reversing the voting thing, that ain't going to do it.
Well, those aren't trad cons either. Those are establishment shills. Those are not trad cons.
What does that mean? I keep hearing that. Establishment.
An establishment shill, it means that they are paid to run a message from their media overlords. And they can't, if you listen to a lot of these trad cons when they leave these mass media industries, even Tucker Carlson has talked about this. They do have messaging that they are paid to push, and they need to push sometimes against their own ideology. So they're just shilling. They're literally paid shills.
Oh, so it basically just means that someone's like paying them behind them and they can't say what they want.
Right. They have to mask their messaging.
Paul, what do you think?
Well, I agree with most everything I've heard here. I think it deserves a little bit different context, though. Pardon me, I've got a cold today, so if you'll bear with my scratchy voice. And I think it's also important to point out, since I've been identified as a MGTOW contributor to this discussion, that I'm a conservative Christian 21 years into a cohabitating relationship. So full disclosure, my perspective on MGTOW is going to be more out of perspective than what I actually live. The problem that I'm hearing in all this, to me, is that I don't see there's any way to squeeze this toothpaste back in the tube. It is out now. Leftist ideology has taken over so much. As a Christian, I'm having a terrible time finding a church that isn't feminized and gynocentric, that isn't pandering to its female congregation. They're just as much a part of the problem as anybody else. So I think everything that's been said here is really great. But when it comes to what to do about it, what we have largely from the other side of this conversation is that men need to step up and get married and pursue family life. And I think that is sending them into a minefield wearing snowshoes with a blindfold on. It's not a tenable answer right now. I think things need to fall apart before they'll ever get better again.
What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, so I disagree completely. So I'm kind of dive in with an overview. I do understand the kind of idea that the right-wing establishment trad shills have no solutions. They just say, "Hey, step up and get married."
Mhm.
The truth is that there is a comprehensive solution which can be achieved. The first thing is that we know that secularists are not reproducing at the same rates as the religious, especially not at the same rates as Catholics and Orthodox. They're just not. It's a numbers game. Going forward another 100 years, we can begin the building blocks now of being able to push our own ideology because there's not going to be anybody to resist it. The birth rates bear this out. That's the first solution. The second is we could do something right now. We could begin to formulate men's rights advocacy groups that have a lobbying arm to Congress in DC to be the counter to feminism. Feminists have lobbying groups all over the place. And for whatever reason, men have not been forming these, and they should be. And they should be pushing their message that they want to Congress, but they're not doing that. I have no idea why. I've always been surprised that MGTOW says there's nothing we can do. The Red Pillars say there's nothing we can do. There is. You can lobby Congress, just like feminists do. But for some odd reason, they don't. And then lastly, we have to begin to have an ideological pushback and literal political warfare against Protestant churches, as they are the pushers now of feminist propaganda. The reason Elam cannot find a church that is not infiltrated with the message is because there's mass corporations all over the place which have bags of money, which they go to Protestant churches with so that they can retrain their staff to be a little bit more friendly to people who support the message. So there is comprehensive things that we can do. We just aren't doing them.
If I could maybe point out, I agree with a lot of what you said, Andrew, but to me, where the argument falls apart is when you say, I don't know why men haven't done this. I don't know why men haven't formed lobbying arms. Well, imagine any American politician right now today getting up before an audience and saying that the family courts are rigged against men. We need to take away gynocentric privilege in our family courts and restructure them. That would be political suicide. He would be dead 5 minutes later. You're not seeing this happen because there is a fatal consequence for advocating for men in our political system. If you want to know why nobody's doing it, that's why.
I think that's a poisonous way to look at things. I mean, the same things are stated about guys like Donald Trump, who they said had no chance if he ran on the messaging that he ran on. We do see that the polarization inside of the United States is becoming such that right now, there was a new poll which just came out that showed almost 30% of the public embrace Christian nationalism. That's something that would just be unheard of even a few years ago. And yet we're moving more and more towards that style of polarization between people. I think that if that message was ever going to be embraced, there's no better time than right now to begin to put some type of lobbying arm together to go to Congress and begin throwing money at them for their reelection campaigns. That's how you get legislation passed.
Right. I agree with Andrew entirely. I mean, if you look at the prongs of the MGTOW is typically set out as marriage as a social construct, that's false. Marriage as a contract, false. Sex egalitarianism, women should work, women should vote, women should be.
I think they're saying like today it is, right? Like I think the general consensus isn't like what it used to be, but that today it is a contract.
But it's an immutable principle, right? Marriage is the single cell of society. It's literally called the original cell of society, even if, as Paul outlined in a genius way in the first 20 minutes of his talk with you, there are all of these problems with the lawfare, and I know there are. I don't disagree one whit. It's natural. Marriage is natural. And to tell men, well, don't engage in this natural behavior because it's a social construct. It's a contract. If I can be honest here, if we look at red pill, MGTOW, patriarchy, patriarchalism, we're looking at respectively an Islamic approach to intersexuality, that's red pill. A Jewish approach to intersectionality, that's MGTOW. And patriarchy is Christian. So social construct, that is literally, Dennis Prager's been saying that this is the Jewish view of marriage for 20 years. I remember working at community colleges as a philosophy professor, listening to him say, marriage is avoidable contract, anticipatory breach. If they're going to breach, you have the right to breach, which is a contract. That's bullshit. It's a covenant. It's a joining of flesh. It's the only way that human beings, all the statistics show, flourish without recurring to crime, poverty, homelessness, suicide, drugs. We're not animals. The only way
their children
human
do better, everything does better. Everything does better in that society.
I'm not discounting that, but I think the more of the pushback is that like most women aren't marriageable today. Like
That's true.
I think there's more to it than that, though. Part of the problem here is that we're talking in the wrong tense. When we say marriage is this, it's a covenant. The correct tense is marriage was. Right now, marriage is an institution governed by our state governments. It is a contract, and the whole entire game, as it is a rigged game for men, with everything stacked against them. Again, we can talk about what marriage is supposed to be, and I'm sure that I would agree with both Timothy and Andrew across the board on what marriage ideally is. But the reality on the ground is that marriage isn't those things anymore.
We're talking about civil marriage,
entirely different.
Yeah, we're not even disputing what you're saying. So we would agree with you that if you're talking about secular marriage, we think it's worthless. It's completely and totally worthless. This is a holy sacrament. You agree it's a holy sacrament, even under your purview. What we're saying specifically is that we want to do something about this. We're not just talking about the state of what is, but what ought be. And so if we're going to do that, we really need to have a lobbying arm, and we need to start putting that together. We have huge resources. Men have huge resources, tons of more people based on your guys' work. I mean, I'm a latecomer to even any of this work. I never even knew that this was such a battle, but it is. A lobbying arm is just going to be necessary at this point. And that needs to happen. It needs to go to DC itself. And this lobbying arm needs to have a war chest and needs to get in the fight so that we can repeal some of these laws, because you're correct, it is rigged. It's absolutely rigged. I think that the TradCons, the real TradCons and the MGTOW, and we can agree descriptively on almost everything. It's the solutions that we have a problem with.
But wait, we have to agree. We have to speak with one voice. And as ingenious as some of the explications you gave, Paul, were for the lawfare, things I hadn't even thought about. You're one of the OGs on this. We can't have anybody representing men's rights out there saying women should be working, voting out in the public square, that they might be smarter than men, that when we date, once we reclaim the institution of intersexuality properly, naturally restored, that men and women should be going Dutch, that marriage is a social construct, that's what the modernists say. Men and women are radically different. And patriarchy, the Christian point of view, just go read any of the epistles of St. Paul. The Christian point of view is, look, we're radically different things. Nature teaches us that men and women are radically different types of human being. It's the most meaningful distinction of all the types of distinctions between human beings. Glasses wearer, non-glasses wearer, race, color, it's sex. And we can't let this get lost in the mix. Then we can go talk in one voice. But I think I was surprised to hear you saying some of that stuff. I think Pearl was too, last time you were on. We have to be of one voice. And a big part of the problem that you weren't diagnosing is the egalitarianism that creeps into MGTOW, because I think it's a Jewish way of looking at the world than a Christian way.
I think the issue is that even like you could get married to a Christian girl that believes in all of those things, but you don't know in 25 years, will she still believe all of those things? And I think that's the point. As long as the state is backing up secular marriage, I see no evidence that I see no evidence that really guarantees a good outcome.
One of the greatest things Paul said, though, was that I really appreciated in that interview, and he said a lot of great things, was, I call bullshit on the idea that there are no tells for crazy. Crazy has tells, and that's why he's been in a long-term relationship. And that's one of the primary flaws with MGTOW. We're not, me and Andrew aren't out there saying what the establishment right-wing shills are saying. Oh, men, just suck it up. Are you men or not? Be man enough to be bossed around by your woman and then have your shit taken in divorce. No, we're saying you still can out there in the private sphere use a few basic tells. Men out there, listen to me. There are basic tells. If you ask a girl that you're courting, once we get married, will you forevermore obey everything I say, aside from grave sin? Will you obey everything I say, which is the Christian point of view? I understand MGTOW, which is more Jewish, Red Pill, which is more Muslim, doesn't operate on this basis. But for Christians, and I know these are mostly apostatized Christians who ain't practicing, but culture matters, and they have this in the culture if they ever return to it. Do you promise that you will, this is your marital vow, obey everything I say? There's no women out there that would say yes to that and flip.
Well,
and there's no statistics for divorce of women saying it. All I see, all my neighbors.
Disagree.
Yeah, I have to
disagree.
Because women go to weddings all the time and stand there before God and clergy and say, "Till death do us part," and then 7 years later they're filing and taking the kids.
Submission, not the death do us part.
Yeah, you can't. To me, that is a very poor shit test to ask a woman what she'll do down the road, because we understand people by watching their behavior, not by listening to what they say. Promises made at the time of a marriage are often, most commonly, promises broken. That is exactly what happens. So get a woman to say, well, yeah, she'll say, yeah, it'll be blowjobs and steaks for the rest of your life. That doesn't mean that's going to be what happens in the relationship.
The cardinal rule is submission. This is what makes marriage work, is wifely submission. And I don't know one guy, of all the guys I've known who have gotten divorces, they were simps during the courtship, simps on their wedding day, 10 times the simp afterwards, and they got beaten up. None of those divorced guys I've ever met, and I run a matchmaking service too, by the way, ask, because they don't have the balls to ask. All right, from the very first date, maybe from the third date or something, once things are becoming more regular, the Christian view of marriage is man's the glory of God, woman's the glory of man. People don't even know this because they're not told. So yeah, I agree all that. The stakes.
One thing to piggyback off of here, kind of throwing out a bone to both sides, to Elam and to Tim, is try to understand too that if a wedding is done in a way in which it's a sacrament, the Protestants don't provide for that. Once a wedding is finished in a Protestant style marriage, it just goes over to the state and it's the contract again. There's no enforcement from any Protestant churches of any kind. There is no processes like the Catholic Church and Orthodox Church have in order to govern marriages. It just doesn't exist. So it's no shock to me then that if you go and you hear these vows a million times inside of your local church, that this, as soon as everybody walks out, the church is hands off. It's done. It's over. So what is there to help reinforce this idea that this was a sacrament and that this is something holy and that this is something you need to stick to? Well, there's nothing there. The ideology does not support the vows that you even just took 5 minutes before. So I think that needs to be kept in mind.
I would also argue, because we're tackling something that has a lot of facets and angles to it, and this would have to be a multi-pronged approach to multiple threats within society, but really boiling it down into two. One, you're going to have to approach the public sphere and the secular world in terms of government law, rules, regulations, and things like that. And that's where Andrew and the idea, if we're going to play within this country, we should, one, go and influence the rules and the laws in the country that we play. And that's secular, and everyone has to obey those rules. But then there's also the individual choices that you make. And that's where I think Andrew is an example of this. Okay, I am going to have these conversations. I'm going to choose the right gal. We're going to raise our children this way. And then also we're going to follow this religion. And then especially to show you where, okay, here's the secular way we do things with the public schools. You guys pulled your kids out of the public schools. You didn't recognize that the public schools were the authority, that they were the source of education. You decided to educate your own kids. And so
Same story with Tim, in fact, same story.
Right, exactly. And so what I'm saying is, and ultimately society is just the amalgamation of individuals and their individual choices. And so the least someone can do is in their own personal lives make these decisions going forward. And if you're going to have kids, that is the future. That's who's going to win to play the next round, is whoever's kids are put into the future there. But carrying over from that is the rules and laws that we have to address and deal with now. So it would require at least two prongs.
Right.
One, lobbying, dealing with the secular world, and then two, under your own household, how are you going to, and as that pertains to marriage, it's kind of this hybrid. Well, you don't answer to the court or the judge for your marriage. You answer to God, or you answer to Yahweh, or whatever the religion is. And I think that would maintain the veracity of marriage more than any kind of rule or law or whatever the state says about divorce and all that. And so I don't think anyone would disagree. It's not MGTOW or Christianity or religion. It's both, because that's both. Just the nature of society.
Yeah, I agree. So I do agree that there needs to be a multi-pronged approach. That's why I kind of outlined one. The first thing is descriptive, which is that those who have the children rule the future anyway. Mm-hmm. And those who have the children who homeschool definitely rule the future because they're creating an unindoctrinated mode to push into society. But as I look at this problem, if I take the kind of bird's eye view that we're all trying to look at here, what I see is that we have no arm whatsoever to lobby for men's rights at all. In fact, when I talk to people about it, who would be great at that, like let's take Aaron Clary here, it'd be fantastic to go to DC and shoot the shit with some politicians and throw money at them to get legislation passed, because it's just a massive bribe system. They don't want anything to do with it. And the reason they don't want anything to do with it is because they're going to be called a misogynist. They're going to have every hit piece on planet Earth taken out against them. And they're terrified of what the repercussions would be. But it's like, I think we're past the point where we got to worry about that. You know what I mean? We're past that point.
And I was even thinking,
I think we are, but I don't think the politicians are. Unfortunately.
Well, there's truth in what you're saying there. It takes time. The suffrage movement itself, the women's suffrage movement, also took a long time. I mean, this was a 75-year plan. This is a gradual change. Look, the Christian ideology encompasses the fact that we understand that the massive, gorgeous, beautiful churches took 500 years to build. They were cross-generational. We're not in a big hurry, right? We're on God's time. We're not in a big hurry. But that doesn't mean that we can't begin to move this process forward immediately. Have a lobbying arm, understand that we need to push this lobbying arm. We need to get a war chest together to go after DC politicians. And all we need is one. And if we start at the local level, local politicians, that's the best place to go. They're a lot less beholden to these massive other alternative lobbying arms. Once you get one localized section, just like the feminists did, you can begin to expand your foothold. So we have to start somewhere is what I'm saying.
Okay,
but what Tim's point is the ideology. If we don't have a unified ideology of trying to move this towards a patriarchy, if we're trying to go lobby for just egalitarianism, then what the hell are we doing? That's what we have now, and it doesn't work.
So what do you guys think? And maybe this would be part of it. I don't actually know. But I was thinking, if it was profitable for lawyers to sue the state, like, couldn't that be a step in the right direction? Like, if lawyers knew they could go to law school and sue family court and actually win and make money. Has anyone ever explored that idea before?
Well, I don't understand the context of what you're asking.
So I've heard about, there's a girl that comes on my show and she works with an organization that is trying to sue, I forgot what it's called, but in England, the child support, child maintenance services, and also the family court. And they're trying to do a class action lawsuit. And their idea is that basically if they can get people together to sue the courts and then make it profitable for lawyers, because it's kind of, I mean, are lawyers just going to do the right thing? No.
Well,
there
lawyers
has
are
to be
going to.
money.
So what James Sexton said,
Yeah.
and he made this great point when I talked with him, and he's a New York divorce attorney, and we had a great debate on Rollo Tomasi's channel. But one of the points that he brought up is like, look, this is an industry. The divorce, the entire divorce racket is a massive industry. Lawyers in that divorce racket are making a shitload of money. Why in the world would they want to mess up their bread and butter by trying to go against that racket? They wouldn't. This is going to take direct action from a lobbying arm. The lobbying is the thing that we have available to us. Lawyers are not going to be a big help. The lawyers are the ones in DC who are politicians.
Hear me out. But what if there was another industry that was predicated on suing family court? Do you think that's impossible?
No, it's not. It's not impossible, but you would need again to establish a foothold somewhere. We need a foothold.
It depends what the statutory provisions are also, Pearl. So in your state, the odds are violently stacked against men. Everyone here agrees. Everyone that's been on your show, Sexton, I watched several shows with him. We all agree there. What I think has to be set before we can even talk about ameliorating the lawfare, which is feminist, is to what extent is culture downstream of lawfare? To what extent is lawfare downstream of culture? Because all I hear is whiny forfeiting when I hear, hey, if you don't keep your marriage together in your private life, the lawfare, which governs how your assets are going to be divided, sucks for men, which is totally true. I think Matt Walsh did a great response video on this. This is nonsense. That the divorce laws in this country don't affect what goes on in my household economy day to day. I have seven kids, wife. I've been married nearly 20 years. Like, I have 6 little girls, man. My 12-year-old, you know what she's going for Halloween? She's going as a feminist, dressing up as a fat chick, got lots of cats. That's because we homeschool them.
But Tim, I also know, like, I have a cousin that did exactly what you're talking about, like exactly to the T. He homeschooled. He had 6 kids. He homeschooled all of them. And growing up, we literally thought they were nuts. I started watching this stuff. I was like, they're right. Oh my gosh. But, he still had half of his kids turn out liberal. And he did I'm telling you, I don't know anyone that took more steps. Like, they went to, what's it called? The Latin Mass my whole life. They were super like they stayed away as far away from the culture as they could. They homeschooled all their kids. Still half their kids turned out liberal. So
does Bat, I mean, look, you and I are sports people. I'm not saying, Pearl, that the rule of averages doesn't get broken, but are you trying to allege, I don't think you are, that a great coach, Popovich, a mediocre coach, Scott Brooks, and the world's worst coach, I take your pick, they're all going to get the same outcome? That's nonsense. This a great general, a medium general, a bad general. That's what a man is.
I would argue it's not a guarantee, and women are still very influenced by the culture.
There's no guarantees in life, but and I don't want to impugn your cousin as an empty set, but I'm a Latin Mass guy, right? I do podcasts to mainly Latin Mass people, and the feminism has infiltrated there too. So there are no guarantees in life. Life's a risky business, but absolutely the law of averages are that if you do things properly and a man runs his household patriarchally by asking, the basic shit test stands. I've never seen someone ask, are you going to obey? No, they just don't do it. And in the Latin Mouse homes, I get invited to dinners and stuff. It's still the wife kicking the husband under the table saying, you need to lead, say grace. That's still her being boss. Feminism is still there. So going to the Latin Mass is not a cure-all. It's not a catch-all. What's a catch-all is the understanding of sex roles as non-fungible. And it's my book, The Case for Patriarchy, didn't do as well in the Latin Mass community as I thought it would, because when I wrote it 3 years ago, I was assuming that I had an automatically sympathetic audience. They weren't, because feminism has infiltrated everywhere, even the sacramental Christian churches like Orthodox.
So if it's infiltrated everywhere, why would you assume it wouldn't infiltrate your children at all?
Well, because I homeschool them. My kids themselves.
Right. But I'm saying like I think it's silly. I think it's silly to think like it's almost arrogant to think they could infiltrate an actual church with people that have been like trained. Like literally their whole job is to push patriarchy originally, and they couldn't. I know I've heard a bit of it, but I'm saying like I think it's naive to think it could never infiltrate your wife or your child. I just think it's a bit naive.
Well, and here's the thing: it does. The thing is that secularists, much like the entire LGBTQ mindset, from my perspective, it's not something which breeds, right? It's something which is indoctrinated into. So you are correct that progressive ideology can even snatch up Christians' children. That's true. But in this kind of overarching battle, as we look at it over time, we also understand that even those children who go off and decide that they're going to be secularists probably are still going to have a lower birth rate than the ones who aren't. So over time, still, the numbers are going to favor us. But as far as action goes, I think that Tim is right. He's kind of moving into what Clary was just talking about when Clary was saying, hey, listen, we do have to start by running our households correctly. Mm-hmm. Obviously, Tim's doing that. I'm doing, we're all doing this. But without this other arm, without this kind of overarching plan to move into action, we have nothing. We have nothing. We have to start to move towards action. And it's true, it has to start in the home. And homeschooling is going to be important for this, but this is going to be a cross-generational battle. It's not going to stop with us.
I would also add,
I think that's a great point in this. And so to that end, I totally support what both Andrew and Timothy are saying. If you're looking at this, excuse me, like 150 year battle, it's possible because it's not going to happen in this generation or the next one, I fear. But I mean, your pitch on this is as good as any. There needs to be a multiple array of reactions to gender feminism. And one of those is MGTOW. Others are just red pill guys, MRAs. There's guys like me who believe in relationships and not willing to forsake them, but I'm not willing to put my neck on the chopping block for the state just to have a relationship. But if you're going at this longitudinally, why not? It's got to be worth a try.
Can I ask a clarifying question though? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Aaron. I just wanted to ask a clarifying question. Why do you think that MGTOW, the ideology of MGTOW, is a necessary arm or prong for kind of this cross-generational battle? MGTOW is essentially saying, we're going to go our own way. We're going to just stop with the engagement of the system altogether. That's a dead end for the gene pool.
Okay.
I mean, don't you think that's like kind of an awful thing to put out?
Those are guys that have weighed out the options and decided that their own lives, their own interests, their own freedom, their own ability to maintain their own assets outweigh the genetic mandate.
Yeah, but that's just pure hedonism, isn't it? Like,
no, I don't think so. I think that I don't agree with the approach of pathologizing MGTOW. These are guys making rational decisions based on what they're experiencing, what they see every day in life. It's fine if you don't agree with them, but I wouldn't pathologize them. I mean, if I want to play the other side of that fence, I'll say, okay, so you're looking for a Catholic nation. Everybody's got to be Catholic to solve this. That doesn't seem like a winning plan to me either. But for guys that just look at what's happening with marriage and decide, no, I'm not going to take the risk on having a couple of kids that grow up to hate my guts, living in a one-bedroom apartment, driving a 20-year-old car because I got divorce raped by the state. Guys looking at that and opting out isn't pathology, it's common sense.
Isn't it fatalism though?
Wait, actually, I have a question. Do you guys agree? Because I with this scripture, it is better to live alone in the desert than with a quarrelsome wife.
Oh yeah.
It's the book of Sirach.
Gee, what does that sound like?
Yeah, but we've all agreed there's not enough wives on the market. So what would that leave?
Well, let me introduce another idea that I think will help, and that's one of feasibility. And what we have to also account for is the general population in terms of how receptive it is to quote a solution, or if they even want this. Many times, if you want to look at the Bible, if the Israelites would lose their way through God, and then an entire generation would have to be, and then they'd find their way back. And I think we're at one of those situations here where whether it's MGTOW who consciously have decided we want nothing to do with this, feminists who are like, no, we want nothing to do with you guys. This is not within our control. We don't control the quality and caliber, let alone the thought processes of people. Not to say that we shouldn't lobby. And again, this is where that long term, it's going to be. If there's ever going to be a return to a patriarchy or some kind of new, more feasible system, it's not going to be in our lifetimes. We are all going to be dead, and I think that's what we have to realize today. Is that this is just one of those lost generations, which reemphasizes the strategy of you have kids, you raise them the way you want. Everyone makes their own individual choice. And sow the seeds for the future generation, because the current generation right now, they're just not a significant percentage of the population is just not having it. There are some ideologue feminists who they're going to be spinsters. They're going to die. Their eggs are going to be frozen, and whatever route that goes, it will end. There will be the MGTOWs who maybe perhaps a little more monk or monastery, like, nope, I'm doing my own thing, but they're fully aware. You're right. They and their children, progeny, will not be part of future society. But I think, especially by a certain age, these people are cemented in their beliefs, and you're not going to get them to come around. So I think a forward-looking, long-term longitudinal strategy, it is the only solution to all this.
Because my question is, like, what is wrong with MGTOW? I'm not saying everyone has to do it, but if a significant number of men look at the market and say there are not enough wives, I don't want a quarrelsome wife, and it's even biblical that it's better to live alone in the desert than with a quarrelsome wife. So, like, what's wrong with that?
Because from our perspective, you're pushing a sinful ideology. So the ideology that we would say is like, fine, if that's true, let's say that there's 50% less women who are decent enough to wife than there are men. Well, that doesn't mean MGTOW also advocates for other things, like it's okay to be a playboy, right? They're not advocating a moral grounding. They're kind of advocating for more.
You'd be surprised. Some of the MGTOW.
They're advocating, but they're advocating for a material grounding. It doesn't have a religious foundation. So the material grounding is just to say this: you're going to get fucked over in today's current society if you get married. It's like, okay, fair enough, but what do we do? What does the man's life look like if he's checking out of the reproduction cycle that he was born to do? Well, what's the answer for that from MGTOW? They don't have an answer for that. They just say, well, I don't know, right? I guess go like fly a kite, right? They don't have an answer for that.
But I think most MGTOW would agree with like the lobbying grants. I think
they would. We could get that together.
Right. But like, to me, it's like, I don't see anything wrong with a guy not wanting to reproduce and like just wanting to live alone because of the state of the market today.
Well,
I'm not saying
Paul even recommended, Paul viewed marriage as a last resort. He said, basically, Paul told people, if you're so sexually frustrated that you just must have sex, then by all means get a wife. Otherwise, it is better for you to not marry.
This is not
He's talking about consecrated celibacy.
This is not the holistic view that the Orthodox nor the Catholics take of Paul's teachings. Is a purely Protestant view. The marriage is something which
it's still Scripture.
Yeah, but we view Scripture in a completely different way than Protestants view Scripture. We view it as a holistic. And when we look at how the Bible references marriage as a holistic, it's very clear that Jesus Christ's teachings were to say that the man is the representation of Christ and the woman the body of the church. Catholics have a very similar viewpoint to this. So the thing is it is highly encouraged. The church has always encouraged it all the way back to the foundation of the church. And it's going to continue to be encouraged because it's the hallmark and the pillar of society. Really, marriage really is, as long as it's done in a sacramental way where both people understand what their duties to each other are.
Paul did not think that, Andrew, that consecrated celibate men in the priestly class would be more than 1 out of 100 or 1 out of 200. He was saying that within the context of marriage, this was the way to stave off what he called like.
But I'm saying, okay, but for those guys, what's wrong with that? That's my question.
Nothing. But they have to become priests. See, this is where it's the conversation can become overly religious. And I like Andrew's answer. It is the correct answer for Christians, Protestant, Orthodox, Catholic. But you asked what's wrong with MGTOW. Pearl, I want to give an answer that is naturally available to everyone, not just Christians. It's fatalistic, right? And I think it's saying we might lose big time. So let's not put our chips forward on the table. And then we'll just guarantee that from a natural perspective, we will never procreate. And I think what drives this fatalism is the egalitarianism that we talked about earlier. Every time I talk to a MGTOW, they're talking about women as voting, being in the public square, being on equal foot of equal rank in the family. That's not right. So MGTOW leaves no room in individual relationships. Let me get it out.
But there's MGTOW that because I'm saying I think the more of the stance is until the risks are lower, we're walking away.
Okay, but
don't you think
I'm saying what's wrong with that?
Well,
I'll answer it.
How should they live? The answer is where it fails in the ideologies. If you check out, what are you replacing the checkout with? Where's our end here?
But I'm not saying every guy is going to come to that conclusion. But I'm saying historically, most men didn't reproduce anyways.
Up to the tune of 60% because but
so I'm saying I don't even think marriage and family is an option for a good portion of men.
But try to remember
the ideal.
That most of the population for most of human history did not exist within Christian centers, and it doesn't even now. So most of the human population is not in the West. So when you're talking about the reproduction of most men throughout history, you're talking about the reason for that is because they were concentrated in non-Christian areas for most of our history. So when you're under caste systems and you're under these different sorts of systems, that's going to happen. Christianity brought in monogamy and brought in the one man, one woman policy. And from that, men have had no trouble reproducing, and you've seen what that's done to accelerate society. Well, I'm not saying that I understand your question is to ask, Andrew, what is inherently wrong with people looking at this system and checking out of it, knowing that their chances of getting screwed over by it are huge? The answer is there's nothing wrong with it if you can give me a replacement ideology for how those men should act in society, then that's what I want to hear.
Well, here it is. And the reason I had to write this is because of everything you guys are talking about. If you don't have family, religion, or some kind of life philosophy to live by, it becomes highly secular. And what you get is a parallel pursuit of life to what the feminists are pursuing. So I'm not going to get married. I don't need Jesus is stupid and all that. That's the feminists. Well, what do? They pursue earthly things. And it's shocking when you remove, okay, what do women pursue? Well, they're pursuing master's degrees and essentially self-praise. They go by material items and stuff like that. And that is a huge problem facing people. And Pearl, to get back to your previous question, well, what's so wrong about MGTOW? Well, it depends. There are men who make a logical self-survival choices, as Paul has pointed out, this is too risky. And they're not wrong. They're 100% right. The boots on the ground reality is there's not enough marriageable women. It's going to make my life worse. It is not our time. It is not our generation. It just is. It is mathematically not in the cards for me. There's another group of MGTOW where I say they abuse it, where they use it as an excuse to not even try in the first place. If the right gal came along, and Paul even has a gal, I have a gal, it's all right. I will change and be flexible. Where it becomes an abuse is where some guys take it as a religion or as an ideology, even a cult, because it excuses them from trying. They don't want to hit the gym. They don't want to go to school. They don't want to learn the trades. They don't want to be pretty. They don't want to be sexy. And they just want to sit and whine in bed. So I remove all those people from it because they have an ulterior goal with the concept of MGTOW. These are the guys that don't ask girls out to dates. They're too cowardly, too afraid. They're fat, et cetera, et cetera. But then for the group of men who made a logical, conscious choice, yet want to live, yeah, it's a problem everyone is facing today. And so I had to, it's a menu. It goes through, it's like a menu. It's very thin and all that. But I go through all these different things, and I'm not throwing away the house or anything like that. But you're looking at things like philosophy. There's things like find religion again. That unto itself, if you face your own mortality and there's nothing else going on, you're not forming a family, you might start looking for a relationship with God, whichever God it might be. But then the pickings get really slim. All right, I'm going to volunteer time for my community. What do you want to do on this planet before you die? And so there is this intellectual, productive, intellectually honest class of MGTOW men, because there has to be. There just isn't the women to go around to get married. Also, a lot of men aren't going to believe in a religion. A lot of people are going to be secular. So without any of that, we're now probably the highest percentage of a generation that has to go and find purpose and reason outside of religion and outside of family. But then there are other people who take it and abuse it and then use it as its own value unto itself, very much like feminists do. That's probably a better example, where how many girls do you know or women do you know that their highest priority is feminism unto itself and how miserable they are. And so that's where there's kind of a MGTOW version of that are genuine misogynists, that genuinely like, we'll get those wascally women, not even because they have necessarily a complaint, but because, well, those are the Green Bay Packers and we're the Chicago Bears and we hate the Packers because we've always hated the Packers. So I think that's kind of the landscape we also have to start factoring in here when it comes to MGTOW and then also religion. But yeah, if you can believe in a religion, all this actually becomes moot. It's in the Lord's plan. It's not in the cards. Like you follow your religion, you follow your doctrine, and then you go on to meet your maker afterwards. This is merely a pre-game, pre-inning show. But for the secularists who don't have a belief in the afterlife, that's a big problem they got to wrestle with. And so I think you're seeing that being played out today, kind of for all of us to see.
Aaron, could you go over the numbers that you were talking about on your stream of the percent of marriageable women?
It's 2.7%. That's comes from my book, The Book of Numbers, and there were 3 methods that we did. I mean, an actuary went over the numbers and kind of tried our best ballpark.
2.7. I didn't even think it was that low.
Well, it's pretty bad. And I didn't think it was going to be that low either. But when you factor in things like other men's kids, obesity, STDs, I'd have to look at my notes and figure out what the methodology was. But there were like 8 major deal breakers of horrible finances, like irrecoverable finances. You're looking at less than 3% of the female population that's marriageable. And that says nothing about your personality or chemistry, or whether you're going to get along with this person. Just people that bring a deal breaker that you could not marry unless you were a simp and you were desperate.
And was that women under what age did you put?
Marrying age between the ages of 18 and 35.
Okay. Yeah. Because that's the one thing a lot of the divorce stats I realized didn't take into account is they would always include the women of generations past, but the women under 30 have been influenced so much more by social media. And I would guess it's probably going to become more grim with that.
It's hard. Divorce statistics are very hard because it's a constantly moving target.
Yeah.
You can have people that are married for 50 years, like, oh, they're married. And on the 51st year, they get divorced. Now you're talking about, well, that was baby boomer, maybe even World War II generation if they've been married 50 years. And so it's a very, I'm intricately familiar with the complications of calculating this.
And there was a huge slew of that too, wasn't there, Aaron, of the boomers getting divorced way later in life that just kind of came out of nowhere?
Great divorce, yes.
Yeah, that was a
Bill
super
Gates,
strange phenomenon. Super strange phenomenon that happened.
Well, and even because even like my grandparents on my mom's side, like when they died, like they were still married, but they were separated for like 10 years. So
Right.
it's like
And it says
they're
nothing
still
about
technically married according to the stats.
here's another thing. Okay, you're
Yeah.
married, but are you happy? And only by my best estimation, only 14% of marriages end with happy till death somebody parted.
Really? 14%. Wow.
14%. Half get divorced, and then 28% are happy, and the other I got 14% of total marriages. Yeah, that's it. And then 28% of those that remain are happy. So you have to take out the half of divorce, and then you get 14% total.
Wow.
What percent of men that die alone with no kids, no progenitors, no one to take care of them, or die happy? There's got to be.
Yeah,
like
it's a fair point. Yeah, no, I don't know. I haven't done the data on it. I doubt the data exists, but you're right as well. I'm merely pointing out, marriage is not, especially secular marriage, which I think we have to make a distinction here for this conversation. Modern marriage is largely a losing proposition for everyone involved.
Agreed.
It's poisonous. It's poisonous.
Everyone here agrees there. I think.
Yeah.
But what do you guys all think the role of the record low male testosterone is? Because testosterone is endocrinologically
Fat
I
girls.
think it's
I'll tell you
endocrine
right. It's fat
disruptors.
women.
it's what makes us into leaders, though. And like the number of marriageable women, I'll assume your numbers is really low. But that presumes leadership as well, because like I said about good coach, mediocre coach, bad coach, Pearl, leadership is everything. And so we're talking deterministically, as if like all teams, this many teams failed to make the playoffs this many years in a row. And therefore, the Michael Jordan 96 through 98 Chicago Bulls has this chance of failing to make the playoffs. Well, look who they have playing. They have the greatest coach of all time, the greatest player, one of the greatest role players of all time. So no, those statistics are not applicable if we're talking about, you take someone out of the population that's like a natural born leader. And there used to be a lot more natural born leaders for men. The testosterone is leaving. So the question is, what's the role of testosterone and its corollary, leadership, in all this? These stats don't apply to guys that are like, look, I could pluck a girl out of the population, go on a few dates with her, set her crazy ideas right, and through leadership, have a team that would win. And I that's what I think is wrong with the MGTOW, Pearl, since you asked. And that's not just religious. It's the fatalism. It's the idea that these guys are fatalistic. Oh, I'm going to lose. It's the Eeyore attitude. Put your hands in your pockets, shuffle off. You're going to lose. I can't. Men and women are the same anyway. We're the exact same thing. So I can't.
Which creators are you talking about? Because some of the stuff you're saying isn't like what I've heard from more of the MGTOW creators. So it'd just be helpful to know who you were talking about.
Well, like I said, I'm not trying to pick on Paul, but in his show with you, which I watched yesterday, women should vote, work, basically be equal to men. Women are smarter than men. That reduces the proposition that men might be leaders. Did
he say that?
Me.
I don't.
I never.
You were surprised 3 times. I'll get you those times.
Well, okay. So I don't remember him saying that women were smarter. He might have. I just don't remember it.
Said in some ways they can be smarter than men.
Yes,
it sounded very egalitarian.
In some ways they can. Survival instinct. I think there's another element to this that we're not talking about. MGTOW is a symptom. It's real easy because of our propensity as human beings to try to control men, tell them what to do, make them of use to our agenda, which is what we're really talking about with the tradcons who keep, Jordan Peterson and others keep telling young men to line up and find a wife and get married in this terrible, terrible system. A lot of it is about abusive control, and men are starting to rebel against that as well. But I do think it's really important to remember that MGTOW are just responding.
Right, they're reactionary.
And it's easier to attack them because they're men instead of attacking the system. And I'll tell you why. With most tradcons, the problem is that they can't go up against women. You won't ever see Peterson or any of that crowd, Ben Shapiro and others, ever utter a single word that the mainstream of women don't agree with.
Agree.
And this is, I think, a bigger problem than MGTOW.
Well, I would tend to agree with this. Your assessment is correct in both ways. So the establishment shills can't go against the feminist archetype, and
They can't
also
go against women.
well, that is the feminist.
It's not just the feminist archetype.
Well,
they cannot displease women.
Which popular trad women don't follow the feminist archetype? They all do. And this is why they can't go up against it. Same thing. I think that you're largely correct when you say that MGTOW is a reactionary group. They formed as a reaction to the things which were going on in society. I agree that that's true, which is why I love the descriptive statements which are made by MGTOW and a lot of the descriptive statements which are made by the Red Pill. I just think that doesn't get us where we need to go, which is past the descriptor and into action. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what we're trying to get at here. And yet, most of the time we have these debates and these arguments, things like this, where these creators come in, we're arguing still about descriptors, which I think we largely agree 95% on. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I wish we could actually move past the descriptor for the problem and into the oughts of what should be done about them.
Let me ask you something.
Sure.
Is what you're advocating for a Catholic nation? Is that the answer? A Catholic nation?
Well, no, I wouldn't advocate for a Catholic nation. I'd advocate for an Orthodox one. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. No,
but it's a serious question.
I'm gonna answer the question.
What's the foundation?
Yeah, so I do think that absent having a religious foundation, that the First Amendment was one of the largest mistakes when it was interpreted to mean that there was a wall separation between the church and the state. That wasn't what it was there for. It was there so that each state could make what religion they wanted be the religion of that particular state. What's happened as a consequence of walling religion off from the population is that now the state has become the religious institution trying to apply these secular values, which are not secular at all. Marriage is not a secular value. I agree with you. There is not a single reason why a secularist man should get married in today's day. There's no reason. There's not one good reason I can think of, but I can't think of why they would even before all of this. I still can't think of a good reason. It's not it's a sacrament. Marriage has nothing to do with secularism, and it never has. My proposal is, as I see that more people are going to be religious who have the children, the future is going to be a more religious future, like it or not. Knowing that that's true, we should be setting down the building blocks and applying the building blocks towards that future, because secularists can't reproduce. They're a genetic dead end. And MGTOW actually advocates that this is basically okay because, hey, you got to check out of this system because this system is screwing you over. So if that's going to happen and they're going to check out, they're going to be genetic dead ends, then it's going to be our offspring that inherit the earth. So one way or the other, you're going to have a religious nation, like it or not. But it sounds like prescriptively, that's probably going to be pretty good.
What do you?
I don't know that you can sell theocracy long term.
Well, I don't know that we can sell democracy long term, since the latest polls seem to be kind of pushing back against it in mass. Mm-hmm. Democracies, you know why they're failing? They can't reproduce themselves. So they have to use migrants to come in and replace the population. We take in 1 million migrants a year, and we're only staying at our threshold of 330 million. That's really bad. If a democracy can't reproduce itself, then you're going to have a theocracy anyway. Since this is true, we might as well start moving the building blocks towards having an establishment that people can actually survive in.
So I have a question. Do you guys, if a guy was to look at the market and say, I'm holding off on marriage until the laws change or unless I find a unicorn, would you see anything wrong with that?
Yeah, I would not advocate that men check out. The thing is,
said he wouldn't check out. He would say, he said, unless I find a unicorn. So if he finds like the 2.3%, does that make sense?
Yeah, I've heard this unicorn thing. The thing is like, look, a lot of people have imperfections, including women, and women can change things around later in life, or they make mistakes. That doesn't mean that they won't end up being a good wife. Mm-hmm. I understand statistically on average, probably not. Okay. But all I'm saying is that if they do decide, hey, look, I'm not going to settle for anything less than all of these things, which aren't deal breakers, which only leave 2.3% of the population. I can't find one of those. That we ought to try to move into some kind of framework for them so that they know how to live their life external of constant misery because they can't find this, because this does not exist for them.
Well, because my thought, Andrew, was that if younger women actually saw older women having consequences, wouldn't that motivate them to act differently?
Yes, I think public shaming is necessary.
So
absolutely.
essentially, if the men all said, no, we're wifing up chicks with kids. No, we are not wifing up fat chicks. No, which is essentially what I said before. Wouldn't the younger generation start to adapt? And then, the new round of 20.
Well, they will.
Is this too hopeful, Aaron?
They will through this type of provocation. This actually been done before. Okay. One of the reasons I always get shit because people are like, "Why are you friends with Pearl? I can't believe it." I'm like, look, she's a provocateur and she pisses all of you off, but brings attention to these kind of important aspects that we don't talk about, which is public shame.
Mm-hmm.
A men's lobbying and advocacy group would be basically a system which is designed to lobby on behalf of men while using public shame. What are they shaming? They're shaming the system. They're shaming how women have taken advantage of it. They're shaming feminism. That's a necessary part of the political theater is shame. And we've just kind of forgotten that that's true. I don't know why.
Yeah, that's why for my end, coming from the traditional Roman Catholic space, I always stick up for you, Pearl. It's like, look, same thing with Red Pill and MGTOW. There's description of the problem. And I think you guys are all right on. It's like we have taken public shaming away from women. The cardinal rule in the gynocentric society is never at any time, for any reason, no matter how heinous, say anything bad about a woman, either deflect or shift the blame, burden shift onto the nearest man. And that's literally the central organizing principle in society now. I think we all agree about that. And it was so refreshing to find your content, Pearl. But when it comes into prescription, okay, what to do now, I really don't like when people are overlooking something obvious, Emperor's New Clothes. And that's why I loved your content. We need to bring shame back for out of control harpies, women in public who think they can have it all and be fat and have a high body count and then get married as if there's no consequence.
Plus it's fun, right? It's fun.
No, it's not fun. I'm going to disagree. Here, and they're not wrong, but there's one thing we're forgetting. This is all taxing. This is all okay. I got to lead my wife, which I know biblically says that. Well, now I got to go grab some gal, de-indoctrinate her, account for the fact she's got student loans. I got to pull teeth. I got to do that. I got to say, hey, babe, you got to hit the gym. She might have some other guy's kids. That is a lot. Or just the idea of like, we're going to publicly shame women or we're going to lobby. This all requires work and effort. And what a lot of, especially when it comes to the MGTOW community, these guys are tapped for energy. They're probably not coming from a wealthy background. They're just trying to get by. And maybe they were lied to and now they're in debt for their student loan debts. They got to get out of that hole. And it's kind of like the Die Hard movie where the sergeant yells at the lieutenant. It's like, you think he's going to get a shit if he makes it out of there alive? He hasn't seen diddly squat from you guys down here. And it's kind of the same thing. These guys are exhausted. He's alone. He's tired. He's hurting. And I think that's a lot of the MGTOWs, a lot of men in general. And they're not going to go. They're just on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They just want to survive and get by. And if they're going to go and introduce women into their lives, they're not going to go and educate the American female public about the merits of being a traditional woman and losing weight. They're going to do what they're doing now and what all corporations do. They're going to go overseas. It's the path of least resistance if they want it. And it's not an end all. And certainly going overseas comes with its own problems. But if a man, secular or not, really is serious about marriage, really does want to find a woman, they're going to do the calculus. They're going to do the math. They're going to say, you know what? Those gals over there are thin. And those gals over there seem to show up on time and don't dye their hair purple or blue and act stupid and all. I'm going to go over there and do that. And I think they're just going to bypass this painful tooth pulling, essentially battle that would have to be here. So, I think we have to think globally and outside the shores of the U.S. and Western civilization, because that's what's happening.
And
There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that.
No,
I'm just saying. I'm saying what we're neglecting in our prescriptions here is male leadership, cultivating. How do we get male testosterone higher? Men are. I'm not saying it in what you guys are calling
women thin.
The TradCon way. The women are out of control, and men don't want to be charged with leadership, which is why they're embracing the feminism and egalitarianism, even in the confines of this space.
Well, I think you can't really lead women that don't want to follow. I don't think you can make women follow if they don't want to follow.
And are we our sister's keeper? Maybe I want to go fish. Maybe I want to not deal with the headache. I think another thing you might want to add here is think about what your average 22-year-old male or female has gone through. They've been lied to. They've been stuck in school this entire time. They haven't learned jack. They've probably been indoctrinated. They can't find a job. Their expectations on themselves go well beyond what they're capable and what the real world's going to give them. They are defeated. They are tired. And now this even assumes you have the bird's eye view to understand the concept that, whoa, I got to lead my women. I got to tell them they're wrong. This is exhausting. This is tiring. And especially when you're 22, 23, let's just say your 20s, you're trying to put food, clothing, shelter on the table. You could barely afford rent. Then on top of it, I got to go and negotiate and lead who doesn't want to be led. I don't have time to tame that Mustang.
We're just talking solutions. That's fine if you're going to say we're tired. We're going to tuck our tails between our legs. All that. I understand. Solutions are tricky. I'm just saying I agree with Andrew that it's multi-generational. I think we all agree there.
Yeah.
I'm just saying women don't get to do exactly what they want, shop till they drop, and eat bonbons. Men do. Leadership entails some things that are unpleasant. And
I just don't see this.
Right. I was going to ask,
but I just don't see this as like a foolproof solution, because I don't see any evidence that when women have leverage, they en masse do the right thing. I don't.
So this kind of moves over actually to Aaron's point. I wanted to kind of give just a moderate critique. One of the things he says is like, "Hey, I don't want the headache. I just want to go fishing. I don't want to deal with this shit." If we look, you say like the young people are tired and this kind of thing. Okay, but you know what? I don't give a damn. The generations before, they fought global wars. They were involved in all sorts of conflict, all sorts of social upheaval as well. Society has never been wonderful inside of the United States. So everything from civil rights fights to political fights to global fights to warfare. All of this previous generations also had to deal with. Where's the ask of duty? What about duty and responsibility? Where does that come into play? You can't just check out and go fishing. There's also a greater duty that you have to your fellow man, right? That comes from our purview and worldview as well.
Let me ask a question about that. Who decides? Who decides what men are supposed to be and do? Who gets to make that decision and apply it to all men, whether they agree with it or not?
So I'll explain this. So you and I may have a different logical way of looking at it. So what I think is logically possible versus what you do might be totally different because of our baseline epistemology. I believe 100% in what God laid down as the duties of man and mankind to other men. Because of this, I feel that my duty is to pursue these things on behalf of all men, regardless of even if other men want them pursued or not, because this is my ultimate duty. Now, you could say, I disagree with that from whatever your purview is, but ultimately, to answer your question,
won't you tell me I'm tucking my tail between my legs if I disagree with you?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say instead, what duties do you have to society? Do you have any?
Oh, yes, I do.
Okay, right. But by the entailment of that, don't you think other men do too, to an extent? They have some duties to society.
Yeah, I trust in the process for men to find their way. And one of the things I tell all my clients, I tell the guys that
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but what process?
I'm not
what
sure.
Process? Well, what process do you trust that men will find their way? So, like, they're not finding their way now. What process?
Well, yes, there is a process of rejecting a lot of bullshit that men are indoctrinated with in terms of gynocentrism, that sort of thing. And there is a process of unlearning. We talk about it in terms of people going through processes like red pill isolation, red pill rage, other factors, and moving them toward what I prescribe as every man should be attached to something that's greater than himself.
Okay, so the process is
to define what that is for anybody.
Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. So the process would be reason. So they're using the process of okay. But the thing
Paul,
is that people can use a process of reason to come to bad conclusions. And this is a problem with baseline epistemology, and why we would advocate and say, listen, if you look at reason from a secular purview, you're always going to come to a bad conclusion every single time. And so that's why we advocate the prescriptions that we do. It would actually be good for us to say to all secularists, you're going to be a bunch of genetic dead ends and only the religious are going to be left. Who cares, right? That's great for us because then we get to inherit the earth. But we have a greater duty to instead warn, kind of ring the alarm bell and say, hey, listen, we don't want your future generations, which are future Christians, to go extinct or have a genetic dead end, or for you to have an awful life, because you're not going to find God that way. Instead, we're trying to push you towards something which is stable inside of society, where we can have men who aren't just going crazy, who are going to die alone and awful, and they're not going to find their path. You know what I mean?
Which is why rights and duties have always been enumerated, because we don't all agree on everything because of reasons. So, like, Paul, rights and duties have always been held in this country to be mutually constitutive. You have rights to do your duties. You have duties to ensure others' rights. Are there any duties that apply to every man that you're willing to enumerate?
Wouldn't you say that most men are doing some sort of duty to society by running the infrastructure, by doing like the hard jobs? Like, wouldn't you say that most men to some?
Funny you mentioned that,
because the other thing I talked to I've talked to I forgot his name's David Baker, and he helps me with some of the like crunching the numbers. Like 45% of men do an infrastructure job. If you expand it to include like truckers, I can't remember exactly what he put under it, but he's told me it was something roughly like 45%. And honestly, like, I feel like what I'm saying isn't not biblical. If it says it's better to live alone in the desert than with a quarrelsome wife, and we agree that most women are quarrelsome, what other conclusion would you come to?
Well, that's the Old Testament, for one thing. It's the book of Sirach, which I think I sent you. It's hilarious, and I sent it to all my feminist friends. But you know what the book of Sirach is saying, Pearl, is that men should lead those wives. That's the whole point.
But I just genuinely don't think, like, you're telling me Amber Heard could have been led.
Well, no,
you know what I mean? Like,
not,
I just think we could look at all of these examples.
And
even just go to any college town. Go to any college town. Those are the youngest, hottest, historically would have been the most marriageable women. And I'm sorry,
they're worthless, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
and so it's like you almost want guys to like ignore everything and just sign up anyway.
Well, we don't. We don't want that.
Not what I say.
I understand, but you're saying just find a good woman, and the response is there are not enough right now to go around. So I don't understand.
You have to marry.
Wait, let me finish. So my question is, I don't see anything wrong with guys saying I'm going to take a decade out of the market and maybe wait till the next round of 22-year-olds come out. Like, what is wrong with that?
Well, that's actually an understandable position.
Yeah.
Again, though, this leaves us with this shortfall. And the shortfall is, if you're going to tell men to check out and away from this thing that they really, really, really want, but is unachievable for them, then there has to be some type of pathway for how they live their life, some type of epistemology that they can follow, some kind of guidance system that they can follow for what they replace that with. There needs to be an ideology to replace it with. If you don't have that, what's that?
Why?
Why should there be an idea? Because
men built civilization as we know it.
that's true.
Is there something about men that you think that without outside intervention, that they can't find their way in life and
Well, I
find
think-
a philosophy to live by?
Well, yes. Otherwise, right now, the suicide rate, well, I don't even know if I can say it, the unaliving rate of men on themselves is at an all-time high. They're clearly miserable. They're clearly miserable. So the thing is like, if you're going to say, we're going to check out, okay, we're not going to do all these things that we can clearly point to as happiness indicators because we just can't find them. Then without having something which is grounding, some purpose that drives their life, something greater than themselves, greater duties, the God, what you end up with is these massive rates of depression. And they literally off themselves. They do horrible things. And no, I don't think that that's good for society. And ultimately, I want a pathway for them to reconcile with God before they die. I think that that's a good thing. But I also don't want him to live in misery. That seems like an awful life.
Okay, so if he's involved in his community, he's going to church. He just says, the women are too quarrelsome on the market right now. I'm going to take a decade off, or I'm just going to live my life until I meet a unicorn.
Yeah, we wouldn't give a dispute to that.
Okay, but that's what a lot of...
I would. I mean, like you guys are still dissevering procreativity and sex, which is at the heart of the issue here, because most of these guys aren't living as consecrated celibates. They're still trying to have their cake and eat it.
Well, and most Christian guys didn't live as consecrated celibates before they met their wives.
They did.
Most Christian guys in history weren't calling
No, I'm saying now in
big
2023, I'm saying most men are not that are getting married weren't consecrated celibates either.
That's true.
And it's a very unhappy way of life.
Exactly.
That's why I asked Aaron, who
my
crunched
point,
these numbers. I asked him, so what are the numbers on male happiness for someone that lives their entire life through 60, 70
I think
days and dies
that's
alone?
like saying men in the NBA. That's like saying men in the NBA are tall. Women tend to like rich, successful men, that are good looking. Those indicators are going to make you more happy anyways. So the women so it's like they automatically attribute it to marriage, but I don't think you can really come to that conclusion.
One thing that you
come to the
really
conclusion
need to
that
take into account too, though, is going to the suicide issue. The typical suicide rate, the differential between men and women is 4 to 1. During the process of divorce and breakup, it goes to 11 to 1. This isn't misery spawned by not having women. This is misery spawned by having women, by having a marriage, by the state involvement in it, by parental alienation, by everything that you guys have already acknowledged that you agree that we're talking about. But this suicide rate isn't about not having women. It's just the opposite.
No, there's
not having families.
Hang on. That only accounts for a portion of it. It is true that in that state where you're going through a bad divorce or something like this, that astronomically increases for men. However, married men who report that they're happy, their general suicide rate decreases rapidly. So there's an offset here.
But it goes back to what I would not attribute that to marriage. I would say, I think if you're going to pool men that are married, they would likely be wealthier. They would likely be better looking. They would likely be in better shape than men that are not, because that's what women select for.
You guys are so selective on your Evo Psych and your Evo Bio. I think one thing.
Do women not like rich men? Do women not like rich men? No, I'm asking you.
Can I finish?
No. Do women not like wealthy men?
Pearl, do you ever let someone finish?
I've let you guys talk a lot this show. I think you probably...
I was just making a point about Evo Psych.
I'm asking you. I'm asking you. Do women tend to pick for tall, handsome, successful men?
Yes.
Okay. Why would we attribute that to marriage?
Because having a family makes people happy. Having children makes people happy. Procreation is at the center of life. It's literally at the center of life.
I'm not discounting that it does for some men, but I think it is just as common nowadays for men to be unhappy as it is for happy in marriage. I think there's a lot of parental alienation that's done even in marriage that is long term. I've seen it all the time. It is so common.
Well, but the
I've
counter to that is to
Mhm.
ask, then why is it that we have so many reports of men who are saying they're so miserable because they can't find a woman?
Wait, say that again.
We also have this indicator from
Mhm.
the research showing that men are reporting that they're extremely unhappy because they can't find a woman and they can't have a family.
Well, I would argue because typically those men, again, they're less wealthy, they're less good looking, and they're fatter. So typically those men are going to be less happy anyways. I wouldn't
Well, no,
attribute it.
the men who are reporting this
Like,
have
I
these
think-
higher standards,
well, I
like the
guess-
Clary style standards,
Mhm.
right? Who say, no, we're going to reject the women who we consider to not be in the tier of what we consider marriage material.
Mhm.
This is a big problem in Christianity, especially where they're trying to find what they would consider a marriageable wife.
Mhm.
They're reporting huge amounts of misery because they can't. So they're actually selecting women out.
Mhm.
Well, I
So-
think it's the main stated cause of male depression when they're 45 and have never been married is that they want to get married
Right.
and can't find a wife. Even Paul in his interview with you last time said
Mhm.
at about 50. See, I have my researchers on this because you guys called bullshit.
Mhm.
Paul said to Pearl, men want to have kids, so you can pay a woman outside of marriage to have a child for you. That's at 54 minutes. By the way, you guys called bullshit on that Paul had said women should work. He said, I'm not an extremist. I don't want to ban women from work. Whatever floats their boat, I think they should do it. You go, girl. That's at 1 hour, 5 minutes.
Mhm.
With regard to voting, he said, I'm a constitutionalist, so I'm torn. Sounded 50-50. That's at 27 minutes.
Mhm.
35 minutes, he said, I question if men are smarter. In survival intelligence, men are retarded. And Pearl rightly, I think, responded saying, oh, I think they are, in response to him saying he questions if men are smarter. So I think this all brings us back to egalitarianism.
Mhm.
Can we get all of the poison, toxic, feminist egalitarianism
Mhm.
out of the red pill and MGTOW movements, whereby I think if we do that, we will be able to move from a description of the problems to a prescription that's much more
but
similar
I
to
would
what
just-
you
I
guys
would
call
just-
tradcon.
I would just argue that the laws have to be changed first. Otherwise, I think it's irresponsible. That's
That's a
my
great
opinion.
first step.
Because
That's a great first step.
I think if you do the opposite, you're going to keep seeing like what was Crowder supposed to do? You know, he got married young.
Yeah.
He married. They waited until they were married. That guy did everything right, and now half of TradCons pushed him being an abuser. Like
That was-
That's half of my clients.
And that's
Yeah.
what I think, unless you've really interviewed the guys that have been divorced, like they're mostly traditional men that wanted to lead traditional lives. And it's like you interview these guys on the brink of suicide and then it's like just sign up anyway.
Yeah.
I don't know if
I
that's
agree.
like I almost think
I agree too.
I almost think it's negligent without the laws being changed.
I
And so
agree.
so
like
when we're
Paul
saying
said, there are tells for that. His wife, and I appreciated that you stuck up for him, Pearl, because everyone was piling on. That was the most clear setup I've ever. She knew there are cameras in the house. She had the
Yeah.
belly sticking. I mean, that was bad, and you were one of the loudest voices, being like, "What?" We appreciated that. But the point is, like Paul said, there are tells. Don't tell me there aren't tells. I'm not weighing in on him and her, but he had to have seen crazy.
But women
before any
are
of that
also,
happened.
I also think we're master manipulators. Like
I agree with
that's
that too.
So
Yeah.
I think to act like there's still not going to be a significant amount of men that are going to have the same outcome. Because again, I see no evidence that suggests when women have leverage that we do the right thing with it. I
feel
only
like
see the
there's a bit
opposite.
of quibbling here a little bit. I would agree, and Tim would agree, that the laws have to be changed. They have to. But I mean, this is a necessary condition. The fact that TradCon establishment shills are saying that marriage laws are fine and just go find yourself one of the decent ones, that is fucking retarded. And everybody knows that that's retarded. We do need to move into a lobbying arm. The MGTOW guys, the Red Pillars, they all agree with us on this. If we can find unison there first, move into lobbying DC to begin at the state level, removing some of these laws like no fault divorce, along with other things, I think that's a great first step. And there's no reason for us necessarily at this point to quibble over theology and things like this, as it's not going to get us where we need to get quickly.
Yeah. So what do you guys think if you were president tomorrow? What would you pass? What would you do?
Sales tax. Eliminate all tax, but it's sales tax. Oh, you mean in germane to this topic of conversation?
Yeah.
Oh.
I would remove the government from marriage.
Yes.
Across the board.
Yes.
Based.
Okay.
That's awesome. So, I mean, from a unilateral perspective, if I was the dictator of the United States, I'd repeal the 19th Amendment immediately. I would limit democracy, just like our founders intended, so that everybody, a stupid 18-year-old could not negate Paul's vote, could not negate Pearl's vote, right? I would limit it immediately by putting in some type of public service that was brutal, maybe something like 6 years unpaid. That way we could limit the pool of eligible voters. After repealing the 19th, I'd also get rid of no-fault divorce. I would do this unilaterally and immediately. I'd get the state completely out of marriage, and I would allow churches to use their ecclesiastical authority and their ecclesiastical processes to govern the marriages. And I would allow only the state to enforce those. That's it. That's exactly how you would do it.
I like all that.
How would you overcome the problem of gynocentrism in the church to get that done?
Gynocentrism in the church exists almost as a uniquely Protestant problem. Though this is an issue that Catholics do deal with, if you look, Catholic is a global religion. Orthodoxy is a global religion. Protestantism is in a way, but really it's only popular in the Western nations, not so much in the Eastern nations. It's never really gotten a great foothold there. And it's because it started really in the movement in the Western nations. So I think that the way that you would get rid of the gynocentric aspect of this and restore patriarchy is by limiting the 19th Amendment's really going to help with that, by the way. But it would be by limiting the state's involvement in marriage, the 19th Amendment, and then also the stakeholder democracy. That basically produces the best outcome as far as who can vote, who can't vote, who has a stake in it. I think that the gynocentrism rapidly decreases because we didn't see it even 100 years ago like we do now.
The one thing I disagree with you on, I really think that the East is just 20 years behind. I don't even think Passport Bros is a solution. The reason being is in London, I have all the guys come here and complain about the women in their home countries. I don't know if it's a solution because I'm kind of seeing the same trend. It just seems to be happening slower there. The STD rates seem to be going up. Abortion rates seem to be going up. There seems to be a decrease in the number of children. Inside of modernity, there's always going to be, so nobody's ever going to be safe from the enemy's ideology. But the thing is that we can see that there are fail-safes that are put in. In Hungary, for instance, they introduced a rekindling of the birth rate, a national state program to do this, and they have been able to reverse the trend. You can see this in the Eastern Bloc nations as they're trying to accomplish this as well. Yeah. But even if you move over to other countries. For instance, Israel. Israel is the only Western nation which has an above replacement rate. I think they're at like 3.7. And it's because they introduced a massive in vitro fertilization program. That's what they had to do in order to compensate for the fact that Western women, Westernized women will not at a young age get married. They gave a free in vitro fertilization program to all of their citizens, and they'll pay hundreds of times for this to happen. And that was just by necessity because they had to offset an enemy who was outbreeding them. The Palestinians, if you look at Palestine, for instance, it's like 50% of the population there are children, right? So they're breeding them out. They're breeding them out. And this is something that we really need to look at is our birth rate situation here and reversing that trend, or we're going to be in big trouble. Yeah. No, I agree with you on I'm just not sure. Like, I kind of see the same trends happening in the East, but I do think that women not voting, that was my solution. That was number one.
Or there's a workaround for that. Just basically make one vote per household, net taxpayers only.
Yeah,
that will,
yeah, that too,
that'll
yeah.
eliminate 95%
80%. Yeah.
of women's votes.
Well, or you could offer. I know one of the things that Hungary did was it offered a complete and total tax exemption for people who have 3 or more children for life. Now, in the United States,
that's
that would
a good
be
idea.
that would be major for people inside of the United States to never have to pay tax again if they had 3+ children, especially for the wealthy people. That would be a huge incentive. The other incentive that you could introduce here, like he said, is the one household. I would just argue that should only be along the lines of a married household. It would have to be a married household, because otherwise you would just have people shack up so that they could vote. So you would have to, you got to kind of think about how you would produce that the right way, but it's a good idea.
As the token Catholic here,
I like the 4 kids per household. I think that's a good idea. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
No, I would just say I'm not actually in favor of what Orban's government did there, Viktor Orban, because it's incentivizing people to have kids when they don't otherwise want to have kids, particularly through in vitro fertilization. They offer that to everyone. I don't think Catholics should be behind that, but I love Pearl's repeal the 19th. That's obvious. I also, of course, am in favor of getting rid of no-fault divorce. That's a huge part of the lawfare problem. Mm-hmm. What doesn't get enough traction is the 14th Amendment jurisprudence, which made, starting really in 1947, Everson versus Board of Ed, this made it illegal and reversed each state having their own sect of Christianity as an establishment. Mm-hmm. That's a huge part of this. If we're going to have Christianity start playing a role again in marriage instead of the state, I don't think I favor getting the state out entirely, but I would want it to be a state legislature thing, not a Congress thing. 1965, they made it illegal through 14th Amendment jurisprudence for the red states to illegalize contraception in Griswold versus Casey. Mm-hmm. That was a reversal. I don't like that. Yeah, so those are the big issues that I think go with taking away the 19th Amendment that are both upstream and downstream of it. That would also make that suggestion that you keep bringing to the fore, Pearl, extra potent.
Are you going to get a t-shirt? Women shouldn't vote. You get a t-shirt?
I will.
Yeah.
I will wear it proudly.
Two things I'd add to this, though. You have to eliminate the welfare state. You just have to get rid of that. There's no welfare.
Yeah.
And then as President Aaron, I would make it illegal for women to be fat. And then your birth rate should go right through the roof. Should solve all these problems. Thin women will solve all the problems.
What would you do? Like if what's the punishment for the fatties?
No, I wouldn't actually do. No, I mean,
would you put them? No. I think I like this idea. We should.
There would be starvation camps. How bad do you want to go?
A fat tax.
There would. I would not do that.
A sin
no,
tax?
I actually think this is the best idea we've come up with.
Your height to BMI, you get charged per mile.
Yeah.
I think we should ban plus size clothing.
I like that.
Then we have a lot of ugly fat people naked, Pearl. You're not thinking too far ahead.
I really think no. We'll send them when they try to order the clothes. We'll send like a treadmill or something. Or like running shoes.
There'd be a lot of fat people in thin person's clothing, which
not a good idea. Yeah,
they're gonna sew it together and wear blankets.
Right. Oh, one thing I forgot is quit incentivizing, especially women, but all young people to go to college. There are tons of federal government incentives to go to college. My 4th book is called Don't Go to College. I nearly missed that one. College is where a lot of goodly young people lose their religion, their faith, their morals. It's where the body counts sky through the roof. Syphilis does, and all the STDs as well. You got to quit incentivizing anyone but natural scholars to go to college. Go to trade school. You can be making $100K, like what Andrew was saying, by 19. These people are going into debt. It's the most irresponsible form of debt, and it's a moral debt because kids are coming out unrecognizable, good kids, to their Christian parents with body cancer.
It's so bad. You know,
horrible.
Even in the undergraduate schools, like it's funny. I have a little sister. She literally has a sleeve. Imagine me, my family, 2 Christian, like or Catholic conservative parents, and she comes out of high school and goes and gets a tattoo sleeve. It's like, why God? And it's because literally she had like a liberal, it wasn't even from school. It was like her horseback riding coach. Like you wouldn't even think, but it's like literally they infiltrate the kids and try to influence them at every chance they get. It's so sad.
Really sad.
Okay, but we kind of agree on a lot of stuff. But everyone thinks we should eliminate the welfare state. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Everyone, no college generally, except for like,
No federal support for college.
Right.
No
So we
government
don't
support,
want the government to subsidize via student loans college degrees. But if college was ever worth anything anyway, the best and brightest, it was supposed to be for the best and brightest. And if everybody can just go, then it's no longer for the best and brightest. Now it's just for the lowest common denominator. So that type of incentive program leads actually to the lowering of standards. So that's one of the major reasons that should be definitely looked at and pulled back. And it's caused huge amounts of debt for no particularly good reason.
Yeah.
Nobody's advocating people shouldn't go to college, only that it should not be subsidized and so that the standards are lowered.
Or culturally pressured. It shouldn't be so
Right.
culturally pressured. Everyone should go. It's bullshit.
And then eliminating no fault. Does anyone disagree on that? No. Yeah. And then I think, did I miss anything? Oh, and then
Repeal the 19th.
Oh yeah, women shouldn't vote. Anyone disagree? Paul,
on a technicality.
Yeah, me too, on the technicality.
My
Come on, guys.
ideal system would be you pay a sales tax, you vote. That's it. Or a net taxpayer system, which you should not have the right to vote based on traits. It's
Yeah.
whether or not you're a productive member of society, which would, like Paul said, it would eliminate the majority of the female vote. But that's for different
like
philosophical
Oprah
principle
can
grounds.
vote, maybe, but everyone.
Yeah. So I think the better question to
It's
ask
like, I don't know.
is, are we all
voting?
for limiting the Democratic pool as it exists right now? I
Yes,
think the answer
absolutely.
would be yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Only thin people should be able to vote. Yes.
Only
that
I
rules
should
out
be able to
Oprah.
vote.
And then
Only I should be able to
Exactly.
vote.
See? Exactly.
dang it. And then also the fat tax. Like women there's fat women are jailed.
No.
And I think it should be a highly punitive tax. If you're freaking obese, you need less money.
They're going to love this one. The TradCons are going to love this one.
So we can kind of start our lobbying group. This was
Yeah. So I mean, that's the main thing is I think that step one for all of this, after hearing all of the arguments for the last year, I would just kind of say this as an endpoint, that the dam has been completely busted, but that doesn't mean we can't build something back that's far more robust and better than it ever was. But it's going to be a step-by-step integrated process that's going to be cross-generational. The very first step to this, no matter what, Pearl has this hammered down, is you've got to get control of the laws. We have to get control of the laws. But in order to do that, we've got to formulate some kind of lobbying firm that is specific to men's rights only. It can't be infiltrated with any other nonsense. If you look at other rights groups, what ends up happening with them all the time, they start with a specific mission. And then once that mission is accomplished, they turn into something completely different, which usually is contrary to the original mission. A men's rights only advocacy group. It doesn't advocate for women too. It's not what about the Mendo, right? It's not there for the women too. It's just for men. That rights group, it will, I guarantee you by necessity, the way that the population is going now, they will get their war chest filled, their coffers filled, as long as it has good spokesmen and it has good representation to DC lobbyists. You can begin to infiltrate that process and at the local level, get a foothold somewhere. You just need it somewhere.
Mhm.
And then you can begin to expand the ideology, just like the feminists did, just like the communists did, just like the left has done. We can do the exact same thing in reverse.
Mhm.
Only thing is, I just want to throw in a caveat there. I mean, I've been watching this stuff and been involved with people working on these very issues for a long time now. I know the work Ed Bartlett's done over at SAID. Warren Farrell is trying to get a commission on a White House commission on boys and men. We're a long way from anything like that getting traction. This stuff gets shut down so fast, so hard, so dismissively. It's a non-starter for any politician out there. There's 2 MPs in the UK that will actually speak about men's issues, which is really interesting. Philip Davis and his wife will speak about men's issues unapologetically. And so there's some good stuff going on there. He's going to be at the next ICMI conference we're having in Budapest to speak there. There is stuff happening, but I just urge anybody getting involved that not to underestimate the level of resistance that is actually there to advocating anything for men.
I don't disagree with this. My only counter to you will be this, and I think that there'll be universal agreement with this too. Money is going to be the key, because that's always the key for lobbying. You don't have to convince a politician with good arguments to move towards your way of thinking. You need to convince him that he can't get reelected without your money. And if we have an advocacy group which is based around a large war chest moving into advocacy in DC, you will see a lot of money pour into that, and politicians will clamor to get at that money. That is the way that feminists were able to accomplish all of their goals, and their handlers, that was the way that they accomplished their goals. Same way the communists did, same way all of them do. We can do the exact same thing. It's just that we aren't. And a lot of it is because we won't even get to a universal agreement on what the solution here should be if we did have a men's advocacy group. But if we can at least universally agree the laws have to be changed, I think that's a good start.
The simultaneity of common action is needed here. And I think that's really all Andrew and I are saying that maybe 2 or 3 of you guys disagreed with. We're not saying table the alteration of the lawfare, do that later. That's what the mainstream tradcons are saying, and we agree it's BS. We're saying BS. There should be simultaneous action in the macroscopic and the microscopic. This means men, all we've said really against MGTOW, men should be looking. There are women out there who are still willing to be led. You don't have to wait. And since it's such a big project to take on this Leviathan that really is at root at the center of society, the gynocentrism, we need all of it going together, macroscopic, microscopic. I think that's all we're saying that's veered
but you
at
would,
all.
You would agree there aren't enough of those women to go around, though, right?
Well, we didn't get to talk so much about leadership. Yeah. So no, I don't know what the number is. Okay. It's low. It's low in terms of numbers of women that are perfect, like near perfect right now. But like Andrew said, non-perfect people have entered into really, really close to perfect marriages. I have some of them as mentors that this is why we were trying to stay away from overtly religious themes today, but as a sacrament, as a religious sacrament, I became a much, much better man, and my wife became a much, much better woman.
But I'm saying it's still ennobling. You would still agree that there's not enough of those women to go around, though, right?
Yes. Okay. So it requires leadership and a combination of factors, which is why I'm saying simultaneous, concomitant actors.
Yes, and some men are going to get left behind, and we don't want them to be in misery when they are.
Right.
Okay. Why don't we do final thoughts now? So I know you guys so Aaron, do you want to start with any final thoughts you have?
Sure. I would say, for a practical bit of advice for everyone to take away, so if you're a young man or a man in general, is you got to protect yourself, because if you are financially crippled, emotionally crippled, etc., you're not going to be of any help to yourself. And using the stats, being a statistician and an economist, we talked a lot of idealism and it doesn't discount any of what's been said, but you have to be practical in your choices. And I'm not religious, so full disclaimer there. And where there is an ideal, and religion can be good for you, you're not going to do yourself any favors spending all this time dating a bunch of girls chasing a unicorn. You have to be incredibly judicious and economic with your time and your resources. And so whereas I am not a defeatist and like, oh, all the girls suck, certainly by all means pursue a relationship. If you think you found the right one and you vetted her, go ahead and get married. But the numbers are not in your favor. And so I would be very careful today going forward. I would also be open to the possibility and the idea that maybe it's just not your time. It's not this generation. Don't not invest in the pursuit of women, but be intelligent about it so you don't waste your life in the process. And that'd be all I'd have to say there. And ban all fat chicks. That was the other thing.
That was the best. That's gonna go in the commercial. Tim, go ahead.
Okay, thanks for putting this on. Again, this is the only channel that's really throwing people like Andrew and me in the mix with you guys. And as everyone can see, without just singing Kumbaya in a fake way, this is 90% agreement, 85, 90% agreement. All I'm saying, and I think all Andrew's saying, is we should get out the strong ambivalence on men-women sexual differences out of the movement, the men's rights movement. We should be able to agree as men's rights advocates that men and women are radically different. Men need to be leaders. This doesn't mean what the establishment's saying. Men shouldn't just take bad divorce law fair on the chin. Mm-hmm. It does involve rights and duties, though. And we need to be crystal clear that leadership is to men, and homeliness and domesticality, this is the domain of women. And once we agree on that, then we can go far. It's a big Leviathan, and we need to have all of the chambers working here, firing to say, people in their private lives, give young men questions to vet women. Like, hey, do you want to be a wife? Do you want to be submissive? A real Christian wife, not the version of Christianity that's been watered down and attenuated.
No, there's no mutual submission. No.
It's awful. And it has infiltrated into Roman Catholicism as well. Mutual submission came from Catholicism. It's awful. But that's what guys like us need to be out there.
Thanks for watching. There is hope in Jesus Christ. He will never leave you or forsake you. Like and subscribe and join our Discord for friends and more.